Hey guys, welcome back to the Contrarians. This is Marco speaking, back again with another episode. So lately you've noticed that we've been doing some solo episodes just to get more frequent episodes out to you guys. Um, Martin's done a couple already. Nick's done like a feedback episode. I've done a feedback episode. So today is going to be no different. We will go back to the dual episodes occasionally from time to time. I think we're going to be recording a worst of edition, Martin and myself this weekend. Today, I'm going to focus on the band Grand Funk Railroad and what my contrarian pick is for best Grand Funk Railroad album. So you got the original lineup of Grand Funk, Don Brewer, Mark Farner, Mel Shacker. That is, to me, that's Grand Funk Railroad. It's those three gentlemen, and the classic lineup put out the most classic Grand Funk albums, starting with On Time, which is a great album. It went gold. You know, most of their albums were very successful. Grand Funk, their second album, with to me has classic tracks on it. In Need, Inside Looking Out. It was a platinum selling album. It did a lot better than On Time did in terms of charts and stuff like that. Then their third album, which is probably one of their most classic albums, one of their best selling albums, highest ranking albums, highest charting albums, Closer to Home. That's, you know, typically seen as Grand Funk Railroad's like magnum opus. Like that's their best album. Typically, you know, it went platinum 2 times. It charted in US, I think around like number 6. Then next was Survival. That charted, I think also charted at 6, but didn't sell as well overall. I think that one's only 1-time platinum. E Pluribus Funk, 1-time platinum. And then you kind of start seeing the decline with Phoenix. Phoenix is an album, to me, was almost, I could have picked Phoenix as my contrarian choice, but I think that would have been a little disingenuous. I really like Phoenix. I like the title track, the instrumental, and I really like the cool kind of harmony they do at the only vocal on the track is like right at the end, and I kind of like that. Trying to Get Away is the next song, which I like a lot. I also like I Just Gotta Know, which is another good one. Rock and Roll Soul's cool on that one. So there's some really good tracks on Phoenix. It typically, if you look, it doesn't have the greatest critical reviews. That would have been a more shocking contrarian choice, kind of like when I picked Flush the Fashion as Alice Cooper's best album. There's a few songs on that I like, and I probably listened to that one quite a bit. Another thing about Phoenix was it was one of the first albums not to be produced by Terry Knight, who had produced all of their albums up until that point, and it was actually produced by the bands themselves. Phoenix is a little bit shorter than some of the other albums. I think Grand Funk's almost 50 minutes. Closer to Home is over 40 minutes. I think it's like 45 minutes. And then this one's just over 40 minutes. I think it's 41 minutes. So it's that would be a very contrarian choice. And it's a little disingenuous for me to say, okay, that one I think is the best one. You often see, you know, like I had said, you know, Closer to Home sold the best out of them. And that, you know, obviously that's an objective thing. That's one of the arguments that I use when I argue against the other guys in these episodes is stuff like album sales and statistics, because it's objective, and it's one of the things you can't really argue. You can't argue that Phoenix was only gold and Closer to Home and Grand Funk were platinum. After that, then you have their mega commercial, We're an American Band. That one charted the highest. Has the number 2 album charting out of all of their albums. It charted at number 2 in the US, but it only went platinum once, which is surprising considering their probably most well-known track and their biggest hit comes off of that album, which is We're an American Band, the song, sung by Don Brewer, and written by Don Brewer as well. There's a couple other tracks I like on there, like Black Licorice is on there. The Railroad's on there. There's a few good songs on there. Mark Farner's great on there. Creepin', like there's some good songs on there, but I kind of think really if you're gonna narrow it down to probably the top 2 albums, if we're not counting live albums, you'd probably go with either Grand Funk, Closer to Home. My choice, which I'm gonna get into why it's contrarian, is the album Grand Funk, and the red album, the album with the band cover where it just shows them right into action. It's all red. It's only red and white as the front cover. I think, in my opinion, that's their best album in terms of song quality, songwriting, song structure, just kind of like really heavy stuff, really cool lyrics. I really like the song In Need, Inside Looking Out. Those two songs right there are two of my top Grand Funk Railroad, probably like my 1 and 2 Grand Funk Railroad tracks out of all of the stuff they've ever done. But I also like stuff like Please Don't Worry and Got This Thing on the Move, I think is a great opening track. And then you have the song Paranoid, which is over 7 minutes of, like at the end there, he's just, Mark Farner's just shredding on the guitar. And that's, another one of my top songs, which is why I like this out. Like when I look at what's a band's best album, I look at from song to song, and like when I look at an album where it's like, man, there's out of like 9 songs, there's 7 good songs. It's, and I can't say the same about other albums. It's like, that's part of the reason why I pick it over, So the Village Voice were not very friendly to Grand Funk, the album. They're quoted as saying, I saw them, the writer was quoted as saying, I saw them live in Detroit before I knew of any of this. I enjoyed them for 15 minutes, tolerated them for 5, and hated them for 40. This LP, their second, isn't as good as that performance. Wow, I would disagree with that. I think it's probably, for me, I guess I'm a Grand Funk fan, so for me, it's definitely enjoyed it for more than 15 minutes. But that's, that's a strike against Grand Funk. So All Music was a little bit more favorable than that. Grand Funk combines rawness with radio-friendly melodies and vocal harmonies that would become their trademark sound. Hordes of bands to come from Foreigner to Bon Jovi would emulate Grand Funk's sound and style, focusing on good time, rocking material while attempting a few token social commentary pieces. Pretty much have Mark Farner doing all the songwriting on Grand Funk, other than the one track that he's co-credited with, Don Brewer, and then the last track, Inside Looking Out. The other album that people often put ahead of it is Closer to Home. And Closer to Home really has a great opening track, which is Sin's a Good Man's Brother. That's the song, like when I talk to my friends who don't really know a lot about Grand Funk, I'll send them that song and be like, check this out. If you really like this song, then I have some album suggestions for you. But I will admit, Sin's a Good Man's Brother is probably the better opening track of the two. Of course, Closer to Home has the epic 10-minute track, Closer to Home, I'm Your Captain. It's all right. It for me, it's a little long, and it's a little, it sounds a little bit too much of that kind of 60s-ish type of pop kind of thing going on. It gets mellower in some parts. It kind of, you know what I mean? To me, it just kind of doesn't take off for me and doesn't lead me anywhere. So that one's probably one of the more disappointing tracks, I guess, from Closer to Home for me. Is probably the title track, and I might get flack for that, but it's just, that's just my subjective opinion. Objectively, of course, Closer to Home was 2 times platinum, outsold, Grand Funk, critical consensus. You know what I mean? You look at like All Music Review, you look at classicrockhistory.com, Rate Your Music, like it's #1 usually, like pretty much across the board. So it is, and production wise, it is a little bit better. It also has Mean Mistreater on there, which I actually like quite a bit. And that's a little bit more mellow, but I kind of like that better than the title track, which also rocks. Closer to Home does rock, but I kind of feel like I said, it doesn't really take off for me. Aimless Lady, it's kind of, it reminds me of Limousine Driver in that it's a little kind of like a slower kind of prodding type song. It's a little shuffly, kind of like Limousine Driver. I kind of put those two side by side. There's actually a really cool cover that I heard of Aimless Lady by the band Suck. They're an Australian band, or they're from New Zealand, and they did a really cool cover of it. If you have time to go check it out, which is kind of, it's a little raw. It definitely isn't produced as well, but just for me, like going, song to song and side to side too. I mean, like side 2, it's only 3 tracks, but I mean, like, I pretty much like every song off of Grand Funk. I mean, Mr. Limousine Driver, it's kind of like a slow type of shuffling kind of song. You know, like I really like the opening track. Again, I really like the opening track. I like Please Don't Worry. In Need Again is like one of my top Grand Funk songs of all time. Um, Winter in My Soul is another one that I like quite a bit. It's a little bit slower, but it's kind of like that slow kind of, you know, head bobbing. It's a little, you know, it's got that bass riff in it, and it's just Winter in My Soul is another good one that I like. E Pluribus Funk. It's another one's got some good songs on it. That one had that opening track on that one, I think, is Foot Stompin' Music. That one's got a long song on it, Loneliness, which ends the album. It's another one that side two. It's got 3 tracks. Side one has a couple more tracks. Of course, everybody knows, you know, the history of Grand Funk. Mark Farner's been out of the band for several years. He's been campaigning to get back in the band. There was the drama between him and Don Brewer over him signing some papers that said Don Brewer owns Grand Funk and he doesn't have a stake in it. He does, from what I understand, he actually still does have a stake in it. He's not a playing member. So I think he does still. I've seen interviews with him where he's talked about going to meetings about Grand Funk and saying, "Hey, like, how come I'm not in the band anymore?" And you know, and Don Brewer just keeps telling him, "Oh, maybe next year we'll bring you back in the band," right? Or just keeps kind of dragging him along with that. But you know, Grand Funk's been around a long time. They're still touring. Famous to Kiss fans, Bruce Kulick's been in Grand Funk for over a decade now. I think he's been in Grand Funk longer than he was actually in Kiss. So he's been in 2, you know, mega American rock bands, but they've been around a long time. You know, interestingly, they haven't put out a studio album with the new lineup. They haven't put out any studio albums since the 80s, I think was the last time. So the band had actually broken up in 1976, but were convinced, interestingly enough, by Frank Zappa to get back together and release the album Good Singin', Good Playin', which Frank Zappa actually produced. Some of the songs, the opening track on that one was Just Couldn't Wait. There's Big Buns on there. 1976, Crossfire. There's a bunch of, actually, there's quite a few. There's a lot of songs on that one. It was not a commercial success. It was the last album to feature all 3 of the original members on it. Frank Zappa even played on it. Craig Frost played keyboards on that one. Then it was after Good Singin', Good Playin' that they finally broke up again and disbanded, which led some of the members to go into to be absolved into other bands. I think Don Brewer and Mel Shacker ended up playing together in another band, Flint. Mark Farner went on and did a couple of solo albums. There was a period in the 80s where Don Brewer and Mark Farner had gotten back together without Craig Frost, who was playing with Bob Seger, and without Mel Shacker, and they released a couple of albums. What's Funk was one of them, and Grand Funk Lives was the other one. And then after that, they had disbanded again for quite a while and got back together in the 90s, and they did like kind of like a reunion tour in the 90s. And then it wasn't too long after that is when all the drama happened with Don Brewer, according to Mark Farner, tricking him out of Grand Funk by getting him to sign some papers of ownership of whatever over to Don Brewer. And so What's Funk was their last studio album. They haven't released a studio album since then, not even with the new lineup with Bruce Kulick and Mel Shacker back in the band. They haven't released a studio album since then. So really, I mean, like, you know, when you look at their stretch of albums, it's really from the late 60s up to the early 80s. Like, it's just that 10 years, but they had a good, I think, like 12 or 13 studio albums. And probably about half of those I really like a lot, actually. Probably that first chunk from On Time up to We're an American Band, I pretty much like all of the albums. My top ones being Grand Funk, Closer to Home, Phoenix. I really like On Time a lot as well. But, you know, like I had said, for certain reasons, I like Grand Funk. To me, just kind of stands a little bit above the other ones just because of the tracks on it. You know, they were a very hardworking band. They put out a lot of albums in they put out a lot of albums in a, you know, short stretch of time. I mean, it was almost like they're one of those like 2 albums a year band, and were very successful. I think pretty much most of their albums at least got gold, you know, if not platinum. You know, if you look at the list of songs that they play live and like what are the top tracks that end up in their set list. I mean, number one is "I'm Your Captain," "Closer to Home." Um, that's been played the most out of any of their songs that they've done. But the top five list is actually pretty spread out among different albums. I mean, "Foot Stompin' Music" is on there. "We're an American Band," of course, is their second biggest song that they play the most. "Rock and Roll Soul," which is another good one. "Inside Looking Out," which is the representative from the album Grand Funk, is number five in that top five. So, but still, I mean, like when you look at the statistics from setlist.fm, those top five songs, it's literally like one edges out the other one because it was played one more time than the song below it. So really, I mean, you know, "Inside Looking Out" it has been like a set list standard probably since they started playing it. Basically, there you have it. There's my opinion. There's the contrarian choice. It's not a shockingly contrarian choice, but it is contrarian in that pretty much everywhere you look, it's "Closer to Home" is the one that's always edges it out. So to me, Grand Funk is the best album. I find it to be a little bit better than "Closer to Home." And other than that, we just want to thank everybody for the subscriptions and the views. We think it's really cool. We got a Patreon page if you want to support us. There's some exclusive videos on there, exclusive content on there. martinpopoff.com for any book related information. Yeah, we're going to keep moving forward. We keep hitting milestones, and just want to thank everybody for coming along for the ride. And this is a bit of a shorter episode, but hope you dug it and hope to see you soon. Thanks.